Have you ever noticed how it's always those small, quiet towns? The kind where everyone knows each other and nothing ever seems to happen, where the most horrific and gruesome crimes tend to unfold. That's often because places like these have a lot of hidden, deserted spots no one thinks about. The small, peaceful, and scenic town of Kingman, located right in the middle of the state of Kansas, USA, is exactly one of those places. A quiet, cozy, and beautiful little town surrounded by mountains and farmland. The roughly 3,000 residents who live there take pride in their community, often referring to it as a jewel by the Ninneskah River. This river, stretching 56 miles and considered a tributary of the Arkansas River, has had a significant impact on the town's growth and identity. With warm, pleasant summers and cool to mild winters, the town boasts a charming downtown with old buildings that have a unique appeal. There are local restaurants, a small shopping center, and a good range of recreational amenities for tourists. But most importantly, Kingman is an excellent place to raise a family. The crime rate is incredibly low, and the overall quality of life is high. It's no surprise that this small town is ranked among the top 10 places to live in the US. But as I said at the start of this video, unfortunately, even the most peaceful towns, where people feel completely safe, are not immune to terrifying acts of violence. And today's case is one such crime that no one in Kingman would ever forget. Welcome to the True Crime Channel. In 2011, 35-year-old Vashti Seacat lived on East B Avenue, on the outskirts of Kingman, with his wife Vashti and their 2 children, Brenton, 4 years old, and Bronson, 2. Brett and Vashti were both born and raised in Kingman. They'd known each other since school days, and their high school romance blossomed back then. But like many teenage love stories, after dating for a while, they broke up, then got back together, then broke up again, until eventually something changed. It got more serious. As the years passed, they realized they didn't want, or couldn't, live without each other. That high school love turned into something deeper, a bigger love that led to their marriage in the summer of 2004. The Seacat family moved to a home in the outskirts of town. A year later, Brenton was born, and 2 years after that, the youngest, little Bronson, arrived safe and healthy. Because Brett and Vashti had spent their whole lives in Kingman and had gone to school together, they were well integrated into the community. Brett had been working for years in the local police department. He was well decorated, having received numerous awards for his work, which eventually led to him being invited to serve as an instructor for the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center. Vashti, on the other hand, worked a few hours each week at a local office. She also regularly volunteered at her son Brenton's preschool, helping organize activities, something she did wholeheartedly, because she truly loved being around kids. People who knew her described her as calm, kind, and deeply lovable. She was a great listener, someone you could trust, but most importantly, the center of Vashti's world was her 2 sons. This little family was always out and about. On weekends, they'd go on picnics with the kids and have a wonderful time. Everything seemed perfect, until one cold night in late April 2011, when something unimaginable happened inside their home. A tragedy that would tear apart a seemingly flawless family forever. At around 4:00 a.m. on April 30th, a 911 emergency call was placed from a man named Vashti Seacat, 35 years old. His voice was filled with panic and fear. He said his house was on fire, that he'd managed to save himself and his 2 boys, but that Vashti was still inside. Fire trucks and police rushed to their house on East B Avenue, but the upper floor of the house was already engulfed in flames. Thick smoke filled every room, It was almost impossible to rescue anyone at that point. When the fire was finally extinguished, the investigation team entered the home. The upstairs was nearly completely burned. In one of the bedrooms, they found Vashti's charred body lying on her bed. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't just the fire damage. A revolver, specifically a .44 caliber Ruger Red Hawk, was found on the mattress next to her body. Finding a gun next to a body inside a mysterious house fire made things far more suspicious than they initially seemed. In the hours that followed, police and forensics began a meticulous investigation of the house to understand what had actually happened. In their first interview with Brett, the mystery of the gun was quickly addressed. Brett claimed that Vashti had taken her own life using that very gun, but that wasn't the only thing he said. He also claimed that she had started the fire herself, all while he had been asleep downstairs on the couch. He told them that he and Vashti hadn't shared the bed that night. She had gone to bed early upstairs, while he fell asleep on the couch in the living room. He said he hadn't noticed anything at first, but then he suddenly woke up to the smell of something strange burning, and right after that, he heard a gunshot. He rushed upstairs to see what was going on, but by that time, the fire had already spread throughout the bedroom. He said he couldn't enter the bedroom at all, so instead, he ran to the kids' room, grabbed them both, and took them outside to safety. Then, unable to stay calm, he left the children momentarily and ran back toward the house to see if there was any way to get into the bedroom. But the smoke was so thick that he couldn't even climb the stairs. He said he only managed to get a few steps up before the flames forced him back. That's why he couldn't pull Vashti out of the room. Realizing it was hopeless, he ran back outside to his sons and called 911. When you listen to Brett's 911 call from just after 4 a.m., he explains this exact sequence. He tells the dispatcher, "My house is on fire. My wife is upstairs. I tried to go up the stairs to get her, but I couldn't. The fire's too intense." And in the following hours, the clues investigators found matched Brett's story, at least on the surface. They found a gas can next to Vashti's bed, the very can used to start the fire. The fire had indeed started in the bedroom, just like Brett had claimed or guessed. He'd said that after smelling smoke and waking up, he ran upstairs, but the flames were already spilling out from under the bedroom door. He couldn't even see Vashti, let alone try to save her. But here's the question: why would Vashti on that Saturday night decide to end her own life this way? If she really set the fire and shot herself, then she knowingly risked killing the two children she loved more than anything else in the world, while they slept peacefully in their beds, just across the hall. And not just that, she would have chosen to do it in the worst way imaginable. In the days after the fire, police interviewed the Seacats' neighbors. One neighbor revealed that just a week before the fire, Brett and Vashti had invited friends over for a barbecue, but canceled it just hours before. When asked why, Brett reportedly told one neighbor that he and Vashti were having problems, and that she wanted a divorce, and that they'd had a fight. That claim, that Vashti wanted to separate, was confirmed by someone much closer to the truth, Vashti's divorce attorney. She contacted the police and told them that Vashti had hired her weeks earlier to begin filing for divorce. She said Vashti had already signed the paperwork and returned it. This clearly suggested that Vashti was planning a life without Brett. So again, why would she burn her home down? And why would she kill herself in such a horrific way? What's more, during the autopsy, investigators discovered something that didn't add up. There was no carbon monoxide in Vashti's blood and no soot in her lungs. That means that when the fire started, she was no longer breathing. Brett had claimed she lit the fire herself and that he woke up moments later. But that doesn't make sense. If she had started the fire and then shot herself, she would have inhaled smoke for at least a short while before pulling the trigger. So why wasn't there any carbon monoxide or soot in her body? The coroner's report noted this, but also said it couldn't conclusively rule the death a homicide or a suicide. It was possible, they said, that Vashti had poured gasoline around the room, then immediately sat on the bed, lit the fire, and shot herself instantly. That could explain the lack of soot. But then there was the bullet wound. The bullet entered from the back of her head. A shot that, according to the medical examiner, would have killed her instantly. Still, they couldn't confirm if she had pulled the trigger or someone else had. And because of her body's condition, they couldn't determine exactly when she died, whether it was just before the fire started or earlier that night. But perhaps someone else could help establish that missing timeline. Because then, police received a call from another neighbor. This neighbor told the police that on the night of April 29th to 30th, he was up late watching TV in his living room when suddenly he heard a gunshot. He was confident it was a gunshot. He had experience with firearms and recognized the sound immediately. He couldn't say the exact time, but he remembered clearly what program he was watching. A documentary that had caught his attention and kept him up unusually late. The police checked the television schedule for that night and found the exact program. That documentary ended at 3:15 a.m., precisely when the neighbor heard the gunshot. Remember, Brett Seacat called 911 around 4 o'clock a.m. In Brett's first statement to police, he said that he woke up on the couch when he smelled smoke, then heard a gunshot upstairs, then rushed to get the kids out before trying to save Vashti. He claimed all of that happened in just a few minutes. But if Vashti really died at 3:15 a.m. during the fire, then why did Brett wait 45 minutes before calling 911? What was he doing during that time? This gap, combined with inconsistencies in his story, made investigators very suspicious. They began to suspect that Brett shot Vashti in her sleep at 3:15 a.m., placed the revolver beside her body to make it look like suicide, then poured gasoline around the room and lit the fire, all while his children were sleeping in the next room. As a former police officer, Brett knew exactly how to manipulate a crime scene. He knew how to cover his tracks. That's why detectives believed he waited 45 minutes to stage the scene, destroy evidence, and make sure the fire was fully ablaze before calling for help. And thanks to the neighbor's testimony, that timeline made more and more sense. If you're finding this case interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe. We appreciate your support. But even with all this, investigators still needed more to prove that Brett killed his wife, especially since the medical examiner had not officially declared her death a homicide. So police had to go deeper and prove that Vashti hadn't pulled the trigger on herself. One key piece of evidence: the divorce papers Vashti had prepared just weeks before her death. To the police, this was a clear motive. Brett knew she wanted to leave, and he couldn't handle it. But when confronted with these new developments, Brett gave a completely different version of events during his second police interview. This time, he claimed that Vashti had been struggling with depression for a long time. He said it was like she'd fallen into a black hole and just couldn't escape. However, when police talked to people close to Vashti, they painted a very different picture. They said she had never seemed anxious, depressed, or sad. Still, Brett had an answer for that too. He claimed that she hid her depression from everyone because she didn't want to be judged. Brett added that Vashti had long been unhappy with her body and had been taking weight loss pills for a while. He claimed those pills worsened her depression. He even described a conversation they supposedly had a few weeks before her death, where Vashti asked him what kind of gun would be best for a shot to the head. To investigators, It became clear. Brett was trying to convince them Vashti took her own life. But the police weren't buying it, and they had good reason not to. Because the more they investigated, the more they uncovered things about Brett and Vashti's relationship. Things that suggested she had every reason to want to get away from him. When detectives interviewed Vashti's friends, family, and therapist, they learned the couple had been having problems for a long time, mostly due to Brett's controlling and manipulative behavior. In November 2010, 5 months before her death, the couple began marriage counseling. Dr. Connie Saderlund, their counselor, confirmed that they had attended sessions together, but said it wasn't long before Brett stopped going. Vashti, however, continued with individual sessions. In those private talks, Vashti revealed how broken the marriage had become. She told Dr. Saderlund that she planned to leave Brett for good. She described him as controlling, and no matter how hard she tried to make him stop, he just didn't have the capacity to change. But Dr. Saderlund also said that Vashti had started to improve emotionally. Session by session, she was becoming calmer, more optimistic. In March 2011, just weeks before her death, Vashti told her therapist about her future plans. She wanted to start exercising again, eat healthier, and move closer to her sister after the divorce so she could spend more time with her family. She also talked about how much she loved being a mother. She said her sons were the best part of her life. She told her therapist she would never hurt herself for 2 reasons. Her boys. She could never abandon them. Her faith. Vashti was religious and went to church regularly. She believed suicide was wrong. But it didn't end there. Just a few weeks before she died, Vashti told Dr. Saderlund that she had finally told Brett about the divorce, and that he had threatened her. She said Brett told her, to her face, that if she went through with it, he would kill her. In another session on April 19, 2011, Vashti told her therapist that Brett also threatened to take the kids away if she left him. Dr. Saderlund told investigators she was genuinely worried for Vashti. She sensed fear, especially since Vashti had signed the divorce papers and was planning to give them to Brett. After hearing all this, detectives became more certain than ever. Brett killed his wife and set the fire to cover it up. But then, a major twist. While going through Vashti's personal belongings, police found her diary, and the final entry read like a farewell note. "Brett, I really can't take it anymore. I just can't. Take care of our son. Be kind to Brenton. Talk to Bronson. Keep the 2 of them close. Tell them their mom loved them." Then she directly addressed the boys. "Brenton, you're amazing. I'm so proud of you. Be a good big brother to Bronson. Bronson, stay strong and never lose your smile. I love you both and will be watching over you from heaven." It sounded exactly like a suicide note, just as Brett had claimed from the beginning. And when investigators compared the handwriting, it did appear to be Vashti's. But here's where things got strange. Vashti always kept her diary in her bedroom nightstand drawer, but police found it in her car. If it had been left in the bedroom, it likely would have burned like everything else. But in the car, it was intact. It was as if someone had wanted it to be found, and that raised an important question. How did Vashti's diary end up in her car? Then came even more suspicious revelations. During interviews at the Kansas Law Enforcement Training Center, where Brett worked, investigators discovered that about a month before the fire, Brett had scanned dozens of pages from Vashti's diary onto his work computer. A coworker actually saw him doing it and asked what he was up to. Brett told them Vashti had asked him to make a digital backup, just in case she lost the original, but that didn't seem likely. Investigators now believed Brett had stolen Vashti's diary, scanned it, and practiced forging her handwriting. On April 29th, the day before the fire, Brett had signed out an overhead projector from the law enforcement center and used it for about an hour. Some of you might remember those old school classroom projectors. Detectives theorized that Brett used a projector to trace or mimic Vashti's handwriting, based on the scanned pages he already had, giving him weeks of practice later. It was revealed that on the evening of April 29th, just hours before the fire, Brett stopped at a gas station on his way home and purchased a gas can. On May 13, 2011, Brett Seacat was charged with first-degree murder, aggravated arson, and 2 counts of child endangerment. He denied everything, and when his trial began, he pled not guilty. The prosecution, however, believed they had a strong case. Even though much of the forensic evidence had been destroyed in the fire, there was a strong chain of circumstantial evidence that painted a damning picture of Brett. Let's go back to that 45-minute gap between the gunshot heard at 3:15 a.m. and Brett's 911 call at 4 o'clock. Dr. Connie Saderlund testified that Vashti had been doing well in April 2011. Yes, she was afraid of Brett, but she was also hopeful and making plans. And then there was the diary, miraculously unburned in her car. The fact that Brett had scanned her private writings weeks before. The projector he borrowed, the fake suicide note, possibly forged by him. The prosecution even introduced a photo taken after the fire, showing papers from Brett's workplace on the dining room table. These papers contain training scenarios about how to differentiate between homicide and suicide at a crime scene. It was as if Brett, a veteran cop and trainer, had been studying his own future crime. In his first statement, Brett claimed he tried to re-enter the burning house after getting the kids out to save Vashti, but forensic analysis showed no signs of smoke or burns on his body or clothes, not even soot on his skin, hair, or light-colored t-shirt, which was strange, considering how close he claimed he got to the flames. But crime scene investigators did find traces of gasoline on his shoes. Vashti's friends, family, and attorney all testified that she had expressed fear of Brett and concern that he might hurt her. The defense, however, argued there was no direct proof Brett killed her. The medical examiner hadn't officially ruled it a homicide. Brett's older brother even testified in his defense, claiming he had seen Vashti just 2 weeks before and that she had looked depressed and frail. He also pointed out that Vashti had been taking weight loss medication, which can cause mood swings and depression. But in the end, it all came down to one thing: the final diary entry. The main point of conflict in the trial was the diary, specifically the final entry, which read like a goodbye letter. The defense insisted it was written by Vashti herself, as a clear sign that she had taken her own life. But the prosecution firmly believed that Brett had forged it, and that he intentionally placed the diary in her car so it wouldn't burn, knowing it would later be found as evidence. To resolve this, both sides brought in handwriting experts. One of them, Dennis McPhail, a highly experienced forensic handwriting analyst who had worked with the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, testified for the prosecution. He said there were major inconsistencies between the final diary entry and Vashti's prior writing. For example, the final entry showed clear trembling in the letters, shaky handwriting that didn't match the smooth flow of her earlier entries. He also said the final note was written very slowly, with some letters obviously traced or corrected, especially the letter B, which Vashti used to write confidently and consistently. In contrast, the defense's handwriting expert argued that handwriting can change under emotional distress, and that the shakiness in the final note might simply reflect the mental state of someone who was about to die. He said if Vashti was crying or terrified, her hand would naturally tremble. Ultimately, it was up to the 12-person jury to decide. After 13 days of trial, they returned with a verdict. Brett Seacat was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years. Every case we cover on this channel is disturbing in its own way, but some are especially unsettling. The more I researched this one, the more shocked and angry I became. How could something like this happen? How could someone do that to their own family? And for what? It doesn't matter how many true crime cases I've studied. Every time I come across something like this, it shakes me all over again. But Vashti Seacat's case was different. This one hit me harder than most, because this crime was so evil, so premeditated, and so cold-blooded, yet so carefully disguised. He took a mother away from her children just because she wanted a life free from his control and manipulation. To be honest, I have absolutely no doubt that Vashti Seacat murdered his wife that night, then set the house on fire to destroy the evidence. He probably thought the flames would erase everything, that he'd walk away free. But he was wrong, because even without direct evidence, there was a mountain of circumstantial proof that told the real story. From what I learned during my research, after Brett was convicted in 2013, custody of the two boys, Brenton and Bronson, was granted to Vashti's family. But I don't think Brett ever once thought about what kind of damage this would do to his children. Because if he had, he would have realized that the only person he was protecting was himself. And that's what makes this case so devastating. Alright friends, that brings us to the end of today's video. I think it's pretty clear where I stand on this case. But now it's your turn. Do you think the evidence presented by the prosecution was enough to convict Brett? Or is it possible that Vashti really did set the fire and take her own life? As always, I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what went through your mind as you listened to this story. I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you again very soon in the next video. Until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
Tucked away in central Kansas, along the Nenaska River, you'll find Kingman, a quiet town home to just 3,000 people.
Right.
It's often hailed for its low crime rates and, high quality of life. A true American gem, on the surface at least.
Yeah, it seems that way.
But as we also discover in our deep dives, sometimes the most shocking and, calculated crimes can emerge from the very places that feel the safest.
Exactly, the unexpected locations.
Today, we're plunging into a case that really ripped through this peaceful veneer. It challenged every initial assumption about what really happened and revealed a chilling level of deception.
No, it really did.
Our focus is the Seacat family. Brad, 35, his wife Vashti, and their two young sons, Brenton, who was 4, and 2-year-old Bronson. They were high school sweethearts, deeply rooted in Kingman, appearing to be, the quintessential American family.
A perfect picture.
And Brad was a decorated local police officer, even trained future recruits. Vashti was described by everyone as kind, community involved, and just absolutely devoted to her children. They were her entire world.
This seemingly perfect facade shattered on a cold night in late April 2011. A 911 call changed everything for this family and for Kingman.
Yeah.
In this deep dive, we're not just recounting events, we're examining how investigators meticulously peeled back layers of a carefully constructed lie. We'll guide you through the evidence, revealing how initial appearances can be dramatically deceiving when someone is determined to hide the truth.
Okay, so let's unpack the moments that first brought this tragedy to light. It was just after 4 a.m. on April 30th when a frantic 911 call came in.
Right, 4 a.m.
It was Brad Seacat reporting his house was on fire. He'd managed to rescue their 2 young sons, he claimed, but Vashti was still trapped upstairs.
That was his initial report.
Emergency services raced to their home on East B Avenue, finding an intense blaze consuming the 2nd floor. The smoke was thick, the heat intense.
That's been a terrible scene.
Once the fire was finally brought under control, what did investigators discover inside?
It was a grim scene, yeah. Vashti's burned body was found on her bed. And chillingly, right next to her on the mattress was a .44 caliber Ruger Red Hawk handgun.
Wow. A handgun right there.
Exactly. And Brad, in his initial statements, was quick to offer an explanation. He said Vashti had taken her own life with the gun, then set the house on fire.
So suicide and arson.
That was his story. He described waking downstairs to a strange smell, then hearing a gunshot. He claimed he ran upstairs, only to find their bedroom already engulfed in flames, making it impossible to enter.
And the kids.
His priority, he said, was rescuing the children. What made this narrative initially compelling, or at least plausible, was the presence of a gasoline can near Vashti's bed.
The gas can.
And fire investigators confirmed the fire originated in that bedroom. So on the surface, it certainly looked like a tragic suicide arson.
Seemed to fit initially.
But as investigators know, the most obvious explanation isn't always the correct one.
Right. And the immediate evidence, while seeming to corroborate Brad's story, could only tell part of it. The real cracks in Brad's narrative would begin to show with the medical examiner's findings on Vashti's body. What did the autopsy reveal that so quickly cast doubt on his account?
Well, the autopsy results were critical. Absolutely critical. They revealed no carbon monoxide or smoke particles in Vashti's lungs or blood.
None at all.
None. And this is a powerful piece of forensic evidence. If she had been alive and breathing when the fire started, those particles would absolutely have been present. It's unavoidable.
So she wasn't breathing when the fire started.
Exactly. This fact alone immediately indicated that Vashti was not alive when the fire began, which directly contradicts Brad's claim that she had shot herself and then set the fire.
It completely undermines his timeline.
Completely. It's a prime example of how forensic science can act as an impartial truth teller, just dismantling a carefully constructed lie.
So if Vashti wasn't alive when the fire started, that immediately shifts the focus. Then a pivotal witness emerged, seemingly out of the blue, but their testimony would pinpoint a crucial timeline discrepancy. What did this neighbor tell the police?
Yeah, this was significant. A neighbor contacted police stating they'd heard a distinct gunshot around 3:15 a.m. on the night of the fire.
3:15 a.m., not 4 a.m.
3:15. And this wasn't an unsure sound. This neighbor was familiar with firearms and certain of what they'd heard, a gunshot.
Okay.
And what makes their testimony so credible is they remembered exactly what they were watching on TV, a specific documentary. Police later confirmed it ended precisely at 3:55 a.m.
Wow, that's specific. That's a significant detail, isn't it? If the neighbor heard a gunshot at 5 minutes later, at 4 a.m., and Brad's 911 call reporting the fire was nearly 45 minutes later, at 4 a.m., what was Brad doing during that long, unaccounted-for time frame?
Exactly. That's the million-dollar question. This glaring 45-minute discrepancy led investigators to a chilling new theory.
Which was
They suspected Brad had killed Vashti at 3:15 a.m., likely shooting her, perhaps in the back of the head while she was still in bed.
Oh, wow.
The subsequent 45 minutes, they theorized, were spent meticulously staging the scene, placing the gun, spreading gasoline, starting the fire to destroy evidence.
Not his tracks.
Precisely. Only once the fire had taken hold, obscuring the true nature of the death, did he finally call 911.
And his job. That plays into it, too.
Absolutely. What's particularly chilling here is Brad's background as a decorated police officer. That knowledge would have given him insight into crime scene protocols, potentially allowing him to expertly manipulate the scene and attempt to cover his tracks.
Using his training against her.
It's a betrayal not just of his wife, but of the very principles he was sworn to uphold.
So, with suspicion now firmly on Brad, investigators naturally turned to motive, and they found one that starkly contradicted the picture of a perfect marriage.
Indeed. It wasn't long before it was revealed that weeks before her death, Vashti had consulted a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings.
She was leaving him.
She had even signed the necessary documents. This provided a very clear and powerful motive for Brad to prevent the divorce from moving forward, perhaps.
Okay, that changes everything. Faced with these developments, Brad's narrative evolved in his second police interrogation. How did he attempt to explain Vashti's death this time?
Well, he shifted his story, didn't he? He now claimed Vashti had been deeply depressed, struggling with body image issues, and had even asked him, supposedly, about the best gun to shoot herself in the head with. He tried to paint a picture of a woman just driven to suicide.
But his claims quickly unraveled, right? Testimony from Vashti's closest friends, her family, and critically her marital counselor, Dr. Connie Soderman, directly contradicted Brad's narrative. What did they reveal about Vashti's true state of mind?
Dr. Soderman was unequivocal. She testified that Vashti was not depressed, not at all. In fact, in their individual sessions, after Brad stopped attending their joint counseling.
He stopped going.
Yes. After he stopped, Vashti was becoming noticeably more positive and relaxed. Dr. Soderman confirmed Vashti genuinely believed her marriage was over due to Brad's controlling behavior and that she was absolutely planning to divorce him.
So the opposite of depressed about it.
Right. Crucially, Vashti had concrete, positive plans for her future, resuming exercise, healthier eating, planning to live closer to her sister with her children.
She had plans.
She did. Dr. Soderman also reiterated Vashti's profound love for her children and her absolute refusal to consider suicide, emphasizing she would never leave them and that her strong religious beliefs prevented such an act. This testimony was a vital blow to Brad's defense.
And as the investigation continued, Vashti's true fears about Brad would come to light, revealing an even darker motive. What did she confide in her counselor about Brad's threats?
This is deeply disturbing. Vashti had confided in Dr. Soderman that when she confronted Brad about her decision to divorce, he had threatened to kill her if she pursued it.
He threatened to kill her.
Yes. And later, in an April 19th session, just days before her death, Vashti revealed Brad had also threatened to take her children if she divorced him.
So kill her or take the kids, horrible choices.
Exactly. Dr. Soderman observed that Vashti was becoming increasingly afraid of Brad, especially as she prepared to serve him with the divorce papers. This paints a disturbing picture of escalating control and intimidation.
With all this evidence mounting against Brad, a critical piece of evidence seemingly appeared that, at first glance, supported his story. Vashti's journal. Where was it found and what did it contain?
Right, the journal. It was discovered unburned inside Vashti's car, which was immediately suspicious.
Was suspicious?
Because she
Awesome.
usually kept it in her bedroom, which was, of course, heavily damaged by the fire. Finding it pristine in the car was odd.
Okay. And the entry.
The last entry in the journal read like a suicide note. It seemed to corroborate Brad's claim of her depression and suicidal intent. For a moment, it seemed to contradict everything else investigators were finding.
But this journal, initially a seeming lifeline for Brad, became the ultimate smoking gun, didn't it? What did investigators uncover about its origins?
This is where the meticulous nature of Brad's deception became horrifyingly clear. Investigators discovered that about a month before Vashti's death, Brad had scanned many pages of her journal on his work computer.
Scanned her journal?
Yeah.
At work?
Yes. A coworker even witnessed him doing it, though maybe didn't realize the significance at the time. But the truly damning evidence came from the morning of April 29th, 2011, the very day of the fire.
What happened that morning?
Brad was observed using an overhead projector at work.
An overhead projector? Why?
Police theorized that Brad had taken the scanned pages of her real journal, projected them, and then painstakingly traced and forged Vashti's handwriting onto a blank page.
He traced it.
That was the theory. He would have had weeks using those scans to practice her writing, meticulously crafting that suicide note to look authentic.
Wow.
This level of premeditation, forging a suicide note weeks in advance, it speaks to a truly cold and calculating mind.
And the web of circumstantial evidence continued to tighten around him. What other compelling details emerged from the investigation?
Well, adding the final pieces to this disturbing puzzle, investigators found security footage. Brad was seen on video buying a can of gasoline at a gas station on the afternoon of April 29th, 2011, right after his police shift ended.
The day before the fire, he bought gas.
The day of the fire, technically, as it happened after midnight, but yes, hours before. Furthermore, photographs taken after the fire showed unburned training documents on the dining room table.
The framing documents.
From Brad's police work specifically, protocols on differentiating murder from suicide.
No way.
Yes. This
Yeah.
strongly implied he was reviewing how to stage such a scene, how to make it look like a suicide.
It's just brazen. And despite his claim of bravely re-entering the burning house to try and save Vashti,
Right, the hero narrative.
Brad's body and clothing showed absolutely no signs of smoke or fire residue. Nothing. Reinforcing the idea that he knew she was already dead and never actually went back inside that inferno.
The physical evidence didn't match his story.
Now, his defense attempted to counter this. They brought in his brother to testify that Vashti seemed depressed and thin, even trying to link weight loss drugs to her supposed depression.
Trying to build that suicide narrative back up.
But the critical finding of gasoline traces on Brad's shirt spoke volumes, didn't it?
It did. That physical link was hard to explain away. The central battleground of the trial, however, undoubtedly became the handwriting analysis of Vashti's journal.
The alleged suicide note.
Exactly. The prosecution's expert, Dennis McPhail, a renowned forensic expert from the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, testified that the last journal entry showed significant differences from Vashti's usual handwriting.
Like what?
He noted a clear tremor, evidence of slow writing, and corrections within the script. He particularly highlighted the letter B, which Vashti typically wrote quickly and consistently in her known samples, but it looked different, labored in that final entry.
Pointing to forgery.
Overwhelmingly pointing to a different author, yes. Someone carefully trying to imitate her style.
Of course, the defense brought in their own handwriting expert to counter this. What was their argument?
The defense expert argued, essentially, that a person's handwriting could indeed change due to extreme emotional states.
Ah, the suicide distress angle.
Precisely. They suggested that the tremor and inconsistencies could be explained by Vashti's supposed intent to commit suicide, implying it was her final, shaky words reflecting her mental turmoil. It was a direct challenge to the prosecution's forensic evidence.
So how did the jury weigh these conflicting pieces of evidence, especially in a case so reliant on circumstantial findings, even with Brad's initially plausible story?
It was a complex task, certainly, but the jury had to consider the powerful, cumulative chain of circumstantial evidence against Brad. You have the unexplained 45-minute gap.
The biggest red flag.
Vashti's true mental state, confirmed by her counselor, her positive outlook on the future, her plans.
For wanting the divorce.
Right. Then Brad's documented threats against her life, and his threat to take her children, the chilling evidence of the manipulated journal entry, the scans, the projector, the handwriting analysis.
Forgery.
The incriminating training documents found unburned, the gasoline purchase, the gasoline traces on his shirt, the lack of smoke on him. They also knew Vashti had already signed those divorce papers.
When you put it all together.
When you connect all those dots, the pattern of calculated deception becomes, well, pretty undeniable.
After a 13-day trial, the jury reached a swift verdict. Brad Seacat was found guilty on all counts. First-degree murder, aggravated arson, and 2 counts of child endangerment.
A clean sweep.
He received a life sentence without parole for 25 years. And crucially, custody of his young children, Brenton and Bronson, was rightfully given to Vashti's family.
Which had to be the priority. This case is just a chilling reminder of the calculated and precise nature of some crimes, particularly those hidden behind seemingly idyllic facades. It's a tragic story of manipulation and control. Ripping a mother from her children simply because she chose to seek freedom from a controlling individual. The level of premeditation and the cold intent to erase all tracks highlight the truly evil depths one can sink to, even within the confines of a seemingly perfect family in a quiet, peaceable town.
As you reflect on this case, consider how a meticulously crafted web of circumstantial evidence, even when a crime scene is largely destroyed by fire, can ultimately lead to justice. What does this case teach us about discerning truth and holding individuals accountable when someone so deliberately tries to erase their tracks and fabricate a story? It leaves you wondering about the hidden stories behind closed doors, doesn't it?